Very nice. Awesome. Sweet. Hello. Is that too loud? No, that's good. My name's Keogh, also known as the harbinger of whatever that word is, of the third wave of games criticism, apparently. So today I'm going to talk about, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I think I'm going to talk about the emergence of book-length games criticism. Is this echoing badly, or can I just hear myself? Okay, good. Thanks, Joel. So I'm going to talk about kind of the book I wrote, why I wrote it, how I wrote it, and just some ideas on why I think writing books about games is useful, ways I think it's not useful, to kind of not be too utopic about it, and just, I don't know, try to get some practical lessons that I learned doing it that maybe will be useful if you're trying to do it. And if this accidentally becomes an advertisement for Press Select, just yell at me. So I'm not trying to do that, but I'll say what that is later. Right, so that's what I'm going to talk about. Why do it, why not do it, how to do it, I think, and that digital is okay now, like why I think ebooks, you don't need to worry about print so much. Right, so firstly I want to make the important caveat that, you know, books about games aren't necessarily a new thing. They've been happening for a very long time. A few easy examples, you know, Tom Bissell's Extra Lives, Tristan Donovan's History of Games Replay, Jordan Mechner, I should have learned how to say that, his Diaries of Prince of Persia, and the other one. Even things like game guides and kind of fan stuff like the Ultimania, Final Fantasies, like, you know, they're books about games that are still important criticism in a way. Of course, Anthropy's Rise of Video Game Zinsters being incredibly important. There's been academic books about games for decades, Bogost's books, many others, Mary Flanagan's Critical Play, of course, Ralph Costa's Theory of Fun. Like, books aren't a new thing. Games of Empire, which is really good, I recommend reading it. It's really accessible academia as well, and not as pretentious as you might think it'll be. But then we have kind of these new kinds of books, like my own Killing is Harmless, and some others that are in the works. So what I think is different about these ones as opposed to all those other ones, I'm not saying better, just different, is that they're very much about a game, written by a critic more so than the developer, you know, trying to understand it from a player's perspective a bit more, rather than trying to understand how this game was built. It's not a making of. They're often about one game or a series of games, or maybe collective over a theme. And you know, primarily concerned with analysing a game instead of a kind of a grand game theory, I guess. That's kind of what I see as maybe this kind of long-form book-length games criticism maybe being somewhat differentiated from those other books. You know, just trying to say this isn't an entirely unprecedented thing. So for me, I think what's exciting about it and where it kind of started was, like, I used to always go into bookstores during my undergrad, especially kind of like boutique bookstores with all their fancy hardcover design books and whatnot. This is actually the exact bookstore in Brisbane I used to always go into. And, you know, you'd see all these books about film and books about albums, and you're like, well, surely there's a book here somewhere about a video game or video games. And it always just seemed weird to me. I could never find one. So I'm kind of excited about these books now, kind of fitting into that, like the kind of popular culture style books about this medium instead of those other mediums, and I find that exciting. It's kind of bizarre to think I'm kind of part of that after not being able to find the books myself. So that's kind of what I think is exciting about them. So why did I write a whole book about Spec Ops: The Line instead of just writing an essay? So this was just going to be why I think books about video games are good, but I thought I'd try to ground it in the specifics of why I wrote a book about a game. Essentially, I thought the game did something really interesting and well. I was really fascinated by its kind of, you know, the overall arc and how all the various elements of it, to me, seemed to work together in a really interesting way. And I wanted to kind of look at that rather than any one specific thing. So when I write an essay, which is probably what I'll do, obviously do far more than I write books, you know, there'll be one particular moment of a game I want to focus on, like one fight or one level or whatever, or one theme overall that I think was good, and I just want to look at that. With Spec Ops, I really wanted to look at how the entire game kind of all worked together, like as this kind of singular creative work, and because I found it really interesting. And the only way I could think of doing that was talking about every single scene in the game, Arguably, I didn't have to, but that just seemed the right way to do it for me. I wanted to look at how does all of this work together. And a book was really the only way to go about doing that. So that's why you'd probably write a book about a game. I guess is the obvious one. They're longer, you have more room to write stuff. It was great. It meant I could go into like a whole lot of little details. I could also, make these kind of broadest statements about what I thought the game was doing, and then tie that down to a whole lot of different moments in the game. Having that breathing room was really great. Of course, and this kind of segues into what I think books aren't necessarily good for, is it's easy for that breathing room to kind of just, you just end up wanking on about nothing for a while. And I totally did that in this book, especially not having any editorial oversight since I self-published it. It's very easy to do that. So I think it's good for writers, obviously, to write everything down, even if 90% of it you cut later. But that became a problem with self-publishing a book. I guess anyone who self-publishes has this issue where you don't have someone saying that paragraph, cut it. So I think the most popular example to laugh at in Killing is Harmless is where I spent like an entire paragraph on the protagonist's initials being MW and how it's like the duality of man, because the W was like an upside down M. And it's really bad. But like I'm not angry I wrote it, but any editor would have gone, cut that paragraph, and I've been like, yep, you're right, I should cut that. And that didn't happen. So I think that's the danger of books is, you have all this extra room, you just kind of go on forever about nothing. So I think I don't want to just say, hey, everyone should write books now. There's a way to go. They're so much better than essays or anything. You don't necessarily need to. A personal example, like I thought Tearaway was amazing. I probably liked it probably around as much as Spec Ops, if not more. And like that's Media Molecules game on Vita. Sorry. But like I don't need to write a whole book about it. I can say what I want to say about that game in an essay. Someone else might need a book, sure, but I didn't need to write a book about it, so I didn't. But they just allow you to do your own things. So Killing is Harmless allowed me this space to kind of talk about this progressive pacing of the game. And Tearaway, I could just talk about its themes in one essay, so I didn't need to write a book. I don't know, I just think that's important to say that like, hey, books have a way to go, everyone should write a book now. I don't think that's necessarily true. So then somehow, so some context, I think a friend and fellow game critic and I are starting a publishing press called Press Select, which we want to publish other books about games. And this kind of started after Killing is Harmless. Well, I was like, well, do I want to write another book about a game? And on some hand, yes, but on the other hand, any book I wrote would just use the exact same method. I would just, choose a game and probably write from start to finish again. And, people don't necessarily need to read that again. And we're much more interested in seeing how other people will write a book about a game. So I think there's multiple ways to do it. You don't have to do it the start to finish kind of almost like weird kind of critical let's play kind of thing I did, or critical walkthrough I did. You can do it as a collection of essays or like interview people and do it thematically. Oral histories are really interesting. They're really good for like MMOs or games that kind of center around their communities. You go and interview people and figure out a very particular history of that game. You can do the kind of new games journalism-y, far more personal kind of thing, like Ken Bauman's Earthbound for boss fight books does that a lot. You can do the very kind of formal dissecting the game a lot, like Daniel Johnson's Warrior Land 4 critical analysis that was released on Stolen Projects, which really just like dissects every single element of this game. Or you can mix all those together. Like you don't need to do it in one way. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting in the coming years as more people write books about games. Like I'm almost far more interested in seeing how people write them and how they approach this idea rather than just necessarily the content, which will also be interesting. I guess the other main point I want to make is like, ebooks are cool. This might be different if most of you go to America. Like in Australia, we don't really have many good print-on-demand services. And we have to use American ones and then deal with American tax forms. And like the one time I did that, I realized why Americans hate taxes so much. But like, ebooks I think are totally okay now. So many people have tablets to read on. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of people. It's almost at that point where just like with games and music before them, people are getting much more okay with reading a book on a digital device. And I think it's a much easier way to distribute your work. And like, I think it's something you shouldn't think, oh, I can't do print, therefore I shouldn't do this. I don't think that's necessarily a good reason. Killing Is Harmless has sold maybe 7,000 copies, maybe more now. 4,000 of those of a story bundle, which helped a lot. But we don't have a print version at all, and it hasn't hurt us. So yeah, I think digital, people can be more confident with that. So just some quick final notes. There's publishers out there you can talk to. Stolen Projects, who did Killing Is Harmless, and also the Warrior Land 4 book. Boss Fight Books, who did a really successful Kickstarter while we were considering if we wanted to do a Kickstarter or not. And they're releasing some really exciting books from some really exciting people. And then Dan and I's company, Press Select, which has some pamphlets of outside if you want to find out more about that, is doing a very similar thing as well. We're just trying to get lots of different people writing books in different ways to see what happens. Or, of course, you can do it yourself, like I did. I don't think you necessarily have to use a publisher. But these publishers are kind of emerging to support you doing it. But it's easy to kind of find, a design friend, offer them a cut of all the sales, and, just start working with them if you don't know how to design an ebook yourself. Yeah. And books to check out, you should check out the Boss Fight book ones. Like, they've already released the Earthbound one, and the others are all coming out soon, I'm pretty sure. And they look really exciting. For critical analysis of Warrior Land 4, it's definitely worth looking at. I had some issues with it, but it is very fascinating, different approach, like utterly different approach than I did in Killing Is Harmless. And for that, it's really, fascinating to me to see how other people look at games. And forthcoming books, there's Rowan Kays is working on a Mass Effect book, and you can support him on Indiegogo, I think it is, Possibility Space. And Justin Cavern is still slowly working on, he's groping the map books with his kind of really rich level design, which are really interesting and definitely worth looking into and supporting as well. That's really all I had to say. I just said some really basic stuff about writing books about games. If you had other questions, please feel free to ask later. Thanks.